They say the rain on the day of a funeral is a sign of the heavens mourning. If that's true, the sky must have loved Nicholas very much. It poured as they lowered his coffin, drenching black umbrellas, and blurred mascara muting sobs into silence. I stood beneath the oak tree at the edge of the cemetery, separate from the crowd of mourners, my gloved hands clasped tightly, my face unreadable. Not because I was numb, but because I was calculating. You see, I had waited for this day. Nicholas Ashcroft, tech mogul, philanthropist, liar, was finally dead. And though the world mourned the loss of a beloved public figure, I mourned something else entirely. The years he stole from me. The woman I used to be. The lies he told me and the ones I told myself. But now it was my turn. As the crowd dispersed, a man approached, clean-cut gray suit eyes, too careful. He offered condolences, handed me a card, and whispered, "We should talk. There are things you deserve to know." His name was Julian Wolfe, and though I didn't know it then, he would become the match to everything I planned to burn. Because Nicholas's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a game I had waited a decade to play, and I intended to win. 3 days after the funeral, I walked into Ashcroft Tower wearing a dress too black and a smile too controlled. The boardroom on the 48th floor smelled like fresh mahogany and cold betrayal. Men in tailored suits and women in tight blouses lined the long table, eyes flicking toward me like I was a ghost or worse, a complication. To them, I was the grieving widow. To me, they were prey. A lawyer cleared his throat and pressed play on a video screen. Nicholas appeared alive but gaunt, recorded just weeks before his death. "Hello." His voice crackled low and weary. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And that means the secrets we've kept can no longer stay buried." Everyone shifted in their chairs. "I leave my company to my wife Evelyn." Gasps. I didn't react. Nicholas went on, not out of sentiment, but because she knows exactly what to do with it. He smiled, a twisted, knowing smile. "And to those of you who think you deserve more, remember I taught Evelyn everything I knew, and she's far more ruthless than I ever was." Silence. The video ended. I stood, adjusted my coat, and walked out without saying a word. They thought they could corner me, but Nicholas had handed me the blade, and now I was finally free to use it. Julian Wolfe arrived at my townhouse just after midnight. He wasn't the type to call ahead. I opened the door to find him standing in the rain collar, turned up, hair soaked, holding a manila envelope like it might burn through his hands. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He didn't speak until I poured us each a glass of whiskey and set the envelope between us on the table. "I worked for Nicholas for 9 years, he finally said, voice low. "But I wasn't just his assistant. I was his cleaner." I raised an eyebrow. Cleaner. He needed things done quietly. Documents destroyed, deals massaged, people paid off. And when things couldn't be paid off, he trailed off. I let the silence stretch. He slid the envelope to me. I opened it carefully. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Grainy surveillance images, handwritten notes, bank records, offshore accounts, names I hadn't heard in years. One I recognized instantly. Lena Hartwell. The woman who used to be my best friend. The woman who had an affair with my husband. The woman who had vanished quietly and conveniently just as Nicholas's empire began to rise. Julian watched my face carefully. "She didn't run," he said. "She was paid to disappear. And when she didn't stay gone, Nicholas made sure she did." The air left my lungs. All those nights I wondered if I had imagined it, if I'd been paranoid, if I was the problem. No, I was never crazy. He was. I looked back down at the photos. One caught my eye, a security cam still of Nicholas at a warehouse entrance time-stamped 6 weeks before his death. Beside him was someone tall-shadowed, unidentifiable. "Who is that?" I asked. Julian hesitated. "That's the problem. Whoever he was, he's still active. After Nicholas died, the payments didn't stop. They just changed hands." I stared at him. "You think someone else is trying to keep the secrets buried?" Julian nodded. "Or profit off them." I leaned back, glass in hand. "So this isn't about revenge anymore," I said. "It's about survival." Julian raised his glass. "Only if we play smart." I smiled. "Cold. Ready." "Then let's play." Lena Hartwell's name hadn't passed my lips in years, but now it lived on my tongue like poison. After Julian left, I didn't sleep. I wandered the house like a restless specter circling the past. The photos, the surveillance stills. Her face frozen in grainy black and white, smiling at my husband like she didn't know I existed, or worse, like she didn't care. The betrayal still burned, not just the affair, the silence, the vanishing, the hollow explanations I was expected to accept, and now a whisper from the grave she didn't run. I pulled the file apart page by page. Julian had tracked wire transfers from Nicholas to an account in Lisbon, then another in Marrakesh, then silence. The trail went cold 2 years ago. But one note stood out, an address in Montreal scribbled in Nicholas's hand. LH, final asset drop, confirm location, no contact. Montreal, winter, a city that erased footsteps with snow. I booked a flight. The apartment was tucked above an antique shop on Rue Saint-Denis. Quiet. Too quiet. I watched for 3 days, saw no movement, but on the 4th night I saw her. Lena. She was older, thinner, her hair darker, but it was her. I followed her to a cafe, waited until she was alone. When I slid into the booth across from her, she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She simply sipped her tea and said, "I wondered when you'd come." My voice was ice. "You faked your death." She nodded. "You let me grieve. You let me think I was insane." Her eyes flicked toward the window. If I hadn't vanished, I would have ended up like the others. Buried. Or worse, on payroll forever. "You could have warned me." "I did," she whispered. "You just didn't want to see it." I leaned in. "Tell me everything, or I swear I'll finish what Nicholas started." She smiled, then soft bitter. "You think Nicholas was the monster," she said. "You haven't even met the real one yet." The silence between us cracked under the weight of truth neither of us wanted to name. I leaned back slowly. "Then tell me who—" Lena's eyes darkened. She folded her hands as if bracing herself. Julian Wolfe wasn't just Nicholas's fixer. He was his partner. I felt the breath catch in my chest. "He came to me," I said. "He brought me the files." "Exactly," Lena said bitterly. "Because he's watching you, guiding your rage, making sure it burns in the direction he wants." "No," I whispered. "He wants to bring them down." "He wants power," Lena snapped. "And with Nicholas gone, you're the key. You inherited the company, the assets, the buried leverage. He doesn't need to fight you, he needs you to trust him." I stood, blood roaring in my ears. Every conversation with Julian replayed in fragments. His hesitation, his timing, the photos he gave me, just enough to spark a fire, but never enough to understand the whole landscape. "Why should I believe you?" I asked. Lena looked at me with exhausted eyes. "Because I don't need anything from you. Not your trust, not your company, not revenge. I just want to stay alive. And for you to know the truth before you hand your soul to the next monster in a nicer suit." I left her with no promises. Back in the hotel room, I poured a drink and stared out the window as snow fell like ashes. My phone buzzed. A message from Julian. "Dinner tomorrow, I have something important to show you." I stared at the screen, then typed back. "Absolutely, let's finally talk face to face." I hit send, and then I started planning the trap. Julian chose a restaurant with candlelight and floor-to-ceiling glass, high enough above the city to feel untouchable. The kind of place where appearances mattered more than honesty. Fitting. He stood as I arrived, smiling, that practiced, disarming smile. "You look stunning. You look like a man with something to confess," I said. He chuckled, pulling out my chair. "Straight to it, then." Dinner began like a dance. Polite, slow, full of veiled statements and eyes that said more than mouths ever could. But halfway through the wine, I leaned in. "I know who you really are, Julian." He didn't flinch, just sipped his wine. You weren't just Nicholas's fixer. You were his partner. His shadow. You knew about Lena. You knew about the cover-ups. And now you want the company." He set the glass down. "You're angry. I get it. But don't mistake control for conspiracy. Nicholas left a mess. I'm offering a way forward. By manipulating me. By protecting you," he said softly. "Do you think Lena told you the whole story? She played the victim well, but she wasn't the only one who got her hands dirty. Nicholas was a monster, but he wasn't alone." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Lena wasn't the only woman he paid to disappear, and she wasn't the first." He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. A face I had tried to forget. Charlotte Vale, my sister, dead. Or so I thought. I looked up, shaking. "You want the truth," Julian said quietly. "Start with your own blood." The world tilted sideways, and the game changed again. I didn't sleep. Charlotte Vale. The name pulsed in my head like a migraine that wouldn't fade. My sister. Gone since I was 19. A tragedy no one ever explained. A case closed too quickly, a body buried too quietly. I had accepted the silence like a wound that would never heal. And now she was back alive, or part of a bigger lie. Julian's folder didn't just have her name, it had flight records, bank transactions, a photograph dated 6 months ago of a woman stepping into a black car outside a hotel in Berlin. She looked older, hardened, but I would have recognized that posture anywhere. Shoulders too straight, jaw too sharp. It was Charlotte. The next morning I called Lena. "I need answers," I said. She didn't ask why. "Come." We met in an abandoned train station north of the city where the graffiti spoke louder than the ghosts. She leaned against a pillar, smoking like the world hadn't moved on without her. "Charlotte's alive," I said. She nodded once slow. "I know. You knew." She came to me first. A year ago. Warned me to disappear. Told me Nicholas had plans I couldn't outrun. Said she was trying to fix things from the inside. I stared. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Charlotte didn't want you pulled in. She said if you found out too soon, they'd use you against her. They already have." Lena exhaled smoke into the cold air. "Then it's time you find her." I didn't ask for help. I didn't need to. Lena pulled out a slip of paper. "Zurich," she said. "She checks into a safety deposit box every 90 days. If she's still alive, she'll be there next week." I took it, folded it into my coat. As I walked away, Lena called out, "She's not who she used to be, Evelyn. None of us are." "I don't need her to be," I said without turning back. "I just need her to tell me why she left me to burn." Zurich in winter is a place made for secrets. Clean, ordered, silent. It took only a name and a fabricated signature to get into the private bank. Nicholas had taught me many things: how to read a lie, how to bury a body of evidence, how to open accounts that didn't officially exist. The woman behind the marble counter checked the information, gave a tight smile, and led me to a vault beneath the city. The deposit box was long steel, unmarked. She left me alone to open it. Inside was a single envelope, thick and sealed with black wax. No name, just a symbol, and Ouroboros the serpent eating its own tail. I had seen it before. On Nicholas's ring. I slid the letter out and opened it with trembling hands. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time. Or mercy, maybe both. I didn't fake my death. I escaped it. And if I told you everything now, you wouldn't believe me. So I'm giving you the next piece. The key to the place where it all began. Our family was never just blood. It was built, engineered. The answers you're looking for are at Marrow Hill. But go alone. And don't trust Julian Wolfe. See." I read the letter 3 times. Then I read it again. Marrow Hill, a name buried in my childhood. The name of the estate my parents once owned. The place we left without a word when I was 8. The place I'd never returned to. Until now. I tucked the letter inside my coat and closed the vault. Charlotte wasn't just alive. She was hunting the same ghost I was. And the next move belonged to me. The drive to Marrow Hill took 6 hours. I made it in 4. It was just as I remembered: long stretches of forest, cracked asphalt fog lingering like breath held too long. The gate stood rusted and chained, but the old access road through the orchard was still there, hidden beneath a veil of vines. I broke the lock. The house stood like a monument to abandonment. 3 stories of stone and silence ivy curling up its bones. Marrow Hill had once been beautiful. Now it looked like it had been waiting. The key Charlotte sent was old brass. It slid into the front door like it had never left. The smell hit me first. Dust, old wood, something chemical beneath it all, like memory soaked in solvent. I stepped through the threshold, and something inside me shifted. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding for decades finally released. Each room was intact, preserved, not lived in but not empty either, as though time had paused. In the library I found the first clue, a photo of my mother and father, taken before I was born. Tucked behind it a note, "Below the chapel, the blood that built us still hums." The chapel was behind the house, hidden in a grove of pines. We used to call it the quiet room. I hadn't set foot there since the night we left. It took me an hour to clear the vines. Inside, the pews were dust-covered, the stained glass cracked. I found the trap door beneath the altar just like I remembered. I descended into the dark. The air was cold metallic. The stairs led to a stone corridor lit with flickering bulbs, still powered somehow. At the end, a vault door. Another Ouroboros carved into the steel. The keypad blinked. I typed my mother's birthday. It opened. Inside was a lab. Monitors, freezers, data drives. A name printed on every clipboard and folder. Project Marrow. Charlotte hadn't lied. Our family hadn't just been built on secrets. It had been built by them. The air inside the lab was colder than it should have been. Not just temperature, something deeper, a kind of stillness that vibrated under the skin. I moved slowly, opening drawers, scanning folders, wiping dust from ancient screens. The data logs stretched back decades, some dated years before I was born. But they all had one thing in common: my family name. Subject lines read like obituaries. Marrow, 001. Subject, Charlotte Vale. Cognitive response phase 1. Marrow, 002. Subject, Evelyn Vale. Pre-developmental observation. I stopped breathing. They had tested on us. Not just studied, not just documented, experimented. Blood samples, MRI scans, behavioral triggers, memory implants. I found a photo me, maybe 6 years old, strapped into a reclining chair, wires trailing from my scalp. In the corner of the room, a refrigerated cabinet held vials labeled with initials, my initials, CVEV, and another HV. My father. I slammed the door shut. This wasn't just a lab, it was a generational prison. On one of the consoles, I found a USB port still intact. I plugged in a portable drive I'd brought, copying everything. Every image, every scan, every line of text. Halfway through the transfer, I heard the creak. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned, heart thudding. A figure stood in this doorway. Thin, wrapped in a dark coat, face half-shadowed. She stepped forward. Charlotte. Her face was sharper now. Older, scarred. She looked at me with something between guilt and pride. I told you not to come here alone, she said. I held up the drive. You left me no choice. Her eyes drifted to the console. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. Charlotte stepped into the light, and I saw the weight she carried not just in her shoulders, but in her eyes. She looked like someone who had buried too many parts of herself to be whole. Why didn't you tell me everything I asked? She took a slow breath. Because knowing wouldn't have saved you. It would have broken you. I deserved the choice. I know, she said, and I'm sorry. I crossed my arms. How long were they testing us? Since before we could speak, she replied. Dad agreed to it. Said it was the only way to keep us safe. Said it would buy us a future. And Mom, she left when she found out the truth. But by then, we were already marked. Charlotte moved past me, started typing on the console. A hidden door slid open in the far wall, revealing rows of preserved files and cold storage units. She pulled a folder labeled Directive Omega and handed it to me. Inside were photos not of us, but of others. Children, teenagers, all marked with our last name. Vale, a whole bloodline. They didn't just test us, Charlotte said. They created us. And then they created more. How many? Dozens. Maybe more. Spread across countries, identities, false families. We were the first wave. The rest, we don't know who they became. I stared at her. Then why are you still here? Because someone has to shut it down. For good. And I can't do it alone. She held out her hand. For a moment I saw her as she once was. My sister, my protector, my first betrayal. I took her hand. Not because I forgave her, but because I finally understood the war we were born into. And I wasn't leaving it unfinished. The next morning we began building the plan. Charlotte spread the blueprints across the library floor, tracing routes, access points, backup generators, everything. Marrow wasn't just a lab, it was a network. Tunnel sites, encrypted archives buried beneath safe houses in 5 countries. We can't shut it all down at once, she said. But we can take out their source, what they call the well. What is it, I asked. A database, she replied. But more than that, it holds every sequence, every subject record, the real names behind the masks. Burn that and the project collapses. Where is it? Charlotte tapped a single square on the map. Geneva. Deep beneath a biotech firm they pretend is private, heavily secured, digital and physical. And what about Julian, I asked. She looked up. If he's still inside, he'll protect it with everything he has. He doesn't need Marrow alive to survive, but he needs it to stay quiet. We gathered what we could. Passcodes, access cards, names. Charlotte had connections in places I didn't want to ask about. I used Nicholas's shadow accounts to fund what came next. 2 nights later, we landed in Switzerland. The rain didn't let up. I stood outside the black glass tower as thunder cracked overhead, the wind slicing through my coat. Charlotte stood beside me. This is it, she said. I nodded. Let's end the family business. And we stepped into the storm. Charlotte and I moved at dawn. Dressed as biotech auditors, forged IDs pinned to our coats, we stepped through the sliding glass doors of the Kronos Genetics building like we belonged there. Security scanned our badges. A flicker of hesitation, then the green light flashed. We were in. The first 5 floors were sterile and modern, exactly what a clean public image demanded. We smiled, nodded, played our part, but beneath the smiles, my pulse thundered. The service elevator was the only way to reach the lower levels. Charlotte had bribed a systems engineer a week earlier to insert our biometric data good for one day only. The scanner lit green. The doors opened. We descended into the dark. Level B4 was nothing like the rest of the building. Concrete metal long halls lined with reinforced doors. Marrow's real face. Charlotte pulled the silenced pistol from her jacket. Non-lethal, I reminded. Depends who we find, she said. The security team was smaller than we feared. 2 guards tranked and stashed behind a power panel. No alarms. At the far end of this corridor, a vault door, the well. Charlotte input the code we'd stolen. The door hissed open. The room pulsed with servers and cold light. A single chair sat in front of the master terminal. Someone was already in it. Julian. He didn't look surprised to see us. I was wondering when you'd get here, he said. You've come a long way for the truth. Or what's left of it. Charlotte raised her gun. I stepped forward. This ends tonight. Julian smiled. That's what I'm afraid of. Julian stood slowly, hands in the air, not in surrender, but in provocation. You don't understand what you're doing, he said. The well isn't just data, it's leverage. On governments, corporations, people who think they're untouchable. Charlotte stepped forward. You're still running Marrow, aren't you? Julian didn't deny it. I took what Nicholas left behind and made it sustainable, contained. It's not about control anymore, it's about balance. Insurance. Insurance, I spat. You experimented on children and prevented wars, exposed traitors, killed revolutions before they killed cities. The world doesn't run on ideals, Evelyn. It runs on threat. I circled him slowly. And what happens when someone like you holds all the threats? Julian glanced at the console. You destroy this, you destabilize everything, and they'll come for you both. They already have, Charlotte said coldly. I stepped to the terminal, staring at the mainframe's blinking prompt. Charlotte's voice cut in. We do this, there's no turning back. Julian moved, then quick-trained. He lunged. Charlotte fired. The shot rang sharp in the sterile room. Julian collapsed to his knees, gasping. She hadn't killed him, but close. I activated the command console. Delete all data. Yes, no. My fingers hovered, trembled. Then I pressed yes. Lights across the servers began shutting down, one by one. The well went dark. Julian slumped, watching everything he built collapse in silence. I looked at Charlotte. We're not experiments anymore. She nodded. We never were. We left the building in silence. The cold Geneva air biting our faces like truth after too long in the dark. Julian was alive barely. He would answer to the world now if it ever dared to ask the right questions. Behind us, the well flickered once, then died for good. Charlotte and I parted ways at the airport. No dramatic goodbyes. Just a nod and unspoken vow that if the ghosts returned, we'd face them together. Back home, I found this house Nicholas built felt smaller, quieter. Not haunted, but finally still. I sold the company. Dismantled the board. Donated the money to organizations that fight for the silenced, the missing, the forgotten. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was justice, or maybe it was a beginning. Weeks passed, then months. One morning I stood in front of the mirror, the same one I used to study for traces of her, the wife, the widow, the experiment. But all I saw now was a woman who had rewritten her own ending. The past didn't define me anymore, because I had burned it. And from the ashes I walked out whole, finally free. The world has changed, and so have I. My name is no longer Evelyn Vale. That name belonged to a girl who trusted too much, and a woman who survived too little. Now I live by the sea on a quiet coast where no one asks questions, and I've taught myself not to answer them. My days are filled with waves, with books, with the sound of silence that no longer frightens me. Sometimes I receive letters coded discreet, from Charlotte, from others like us. The project may be gone, but the ones we saved still live in the shadows. We teach them how to stay hidden, how to stay human, how to choose. Some nights I sit by the window with a glass of red wine watching the tide roll in. I think about Nicholas, about Julian, about the game they played and the one I won, and I wonder if they ever expected me to outlive them all. I did, and I'm still here. Free, yes, but never finished.